As you all can see on your screens, most of our attendees don't know much about the topic but are curious to know more. Some have read a little about it, some have studied it and wish to pursue it further, and some are working professionals in the field. I think it's really great that we have such a good mix of different backgrounds amongst all our attendees. And I think with that, we are all set to begin our panel discussion. It gives me great pleasure in inviting Mr. Amitabh Shrivastava, who's the moderator and the curator of this panel discussion. He is a technologist himself and has extensively worked in the field of commercialization of scientific research and is right now an angel investor and a venture capitalist. Sir, thank you so much for moderating this discussion for us. If you could please turn on your video and introduce all the other panelists that we have here. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Shruti, and thank you to India Science Festival for inviting us. It's a great pleasure for me to be here amongst very distinguished panelists who I'm going to shortly introduce. So my background, as Shruti pointed out, is I've dealt a lot with technology commercialization, and I was a technologist in the earlier part of my career, very early part of my career, and then now over the last 20 odd years, I've been very actively involved, not only as a founder of startup companies, great technology companies, also an investor, and now I'm a managing partner at my own fund called July Ventures. So basically, the topic is, does science yield economic value? And as we all know, that bulk of the work which is funded in the science area is funded by the taxpayers' money throughout the world, most part of the world. And the question is often asked, directly or indirectly, what's the output? What's the outcome? And the answer, of course, is an absolute yes. The question counter to this could be that, what environmental factors enable the optimal economic value to be derived from scientific endeavors. And to discuss these and the related topics, I have a brilliant panel, as I mentioned earlier. All of these panelists come with an excellent background of having been scientists and entrepreneurs themselves, whether they worked for-profit or not-for-profit ventures. Each one of them has a global perspective on the contributions of scientific research and its translation into economic value and economic good. Well, thank you all for switching on your videos. So let me just start with Professor Vijay Chandru. He's an academic and a serial entrepreneur. To say that he is better known as the founder of Strand Life Sciences would be very belittling to his equally important contribution to the society as an academician, a researcher, and a professor. Professor Chandru received his bachelor's degree from BITS Pilani. He's an MSc from UCLA and a PhD from MIT. He has served as a professor at Purdue University, the Indian Institute of Sciences, Bangalore. He has several awards and public recognition to his credit. As an entrepreneur, he has co-founded Strand Life Sciences and Simputer, some of you will remember, which was the India's first homegrown handheld computers, and at least half a dozen other companies where I think he's involved, and maybe more, and he can tell us more about the same. The next is Dr. Premnath. He's been a friend of mine for over the last 8 odd years. He's currently the head of NCL Innovations. He heads the IP group, and he's a senior scientist at the National Chemical Laboratory, which is better known as NCL in Pune. He's a legend, certainly from my perspective, in the scientific entrepreneurial ecosystem, of which I have been a part myself for a long, long time. And everywhere I go, I come across companies that have some linkages to the NCL Pune. And it's one of the best run incubators in India, by all means. So Dr. Premnath is a PhD from MIT. He's a BTech from IIT Bombay, and he has many other academic studies that he's done at Cambridge and the London Business School. And personally, I have been very fortunate to have him as the director of CSIR Tech, which was a tech commercialization company. And in the initial days, even before I got involved with CSIR Tech, Dr. Premnath was the one who, along with Dr. Shivram, Dr. Vijay Kelkar, Mohandas Pai, Saurabh Shrivastava, and others, they ideated this whole thing. And for various reasons, it did well. We raised private capital, and Dr. Premnath was, very helpful in the whole process. Uh, Last panelist is also a very dear friend of mine, Dr. Vandana Sandra. Sarda. She's the principal at Zintio Healthcare. She's, I think, forging strategic alliances and partnerships across various platforms in the value chain. And I think prior to that, Vandana and I, since 2014, was it, Vandana, that you and I have worked at CSI Tech? She was heading the life sciences tech transfer company. CSI Tech was a tech transfer company and also was did have a venture fund. And Vandana used to head the the biotechnology life sciences part of the business, and she was one of the most outstanding performers. She dealt with some 20 plus laboratories, mostly government funded, some private, to help commercialize technology. She would read these chairman's report of various listed companies and kind of make an assessment of what they might look at in terms of future, where the company is going, and then look in the database of all the IP that was curated, and she would make proposals to those. She did a fantastic job. She's a PhD from Drexel University, US in biotechnology, and she's an MSc from Heriot-Watt, UK, and has done her business management from SPJIMR. So with that, let me just open this up. Oh, just one more thing. Some piece of statistics about how much India spends on R&D. It's supposed to be 0.8% of our GDP, which by global standards is quite low for comparable countries. Many countries in the G20 would invest up to 2 point odd some percentage, or 2.3 or 2.5%. And countries like Israel and Korea and some of the others spend upwards of 4 or 5%. Of course, the amount of GDP differs, but the point is how much of a contribution you make towards scientific endeavors. So let me start with Professor Chandru. Professor Chandru, we Indians have a great history of significant contribution to the world in terms of science. Do you feel that somehow we may have, in these days, deprioritized science now compared to the rest of the world?
I don't believe so. I think, we still have extraordinary scientific institutions all over the country. They do command a lot of respect, both domestically and internationally. And Indian scientists are well regarded everywhere. So I don't believe we have deprioritized science in any way. I think that the question, given the context of today's discussion, might be: is there enough value coming out of the scientific sector to the economy? I remember, I was at a conference called Select USA. It's like we have Invest in India. The US runs Select USA, and Eric Schmidt was on stage, and he was asked, why is it that US is such a dominant innovation player, right? And his point was higher education. And he said the higher educational system of the US, and particularly, post World War II, because of people like Vannevar Bush and others, the way in which that higher educational system has connected with the economy and the kind of value that it has created for the economy is what is the secret sauce, right, of the success of the US. And I think so. Our investment in our higher educational institutions has been high, and I think and science has been a priority, and I think it's time that this priority delivers, right, to society. And I think that's the question to ask. I don't think we're deprioritizing, but how to prioritize the value creation, right?
That's a good input. Yeah, thanks for that. So, if we were to measure the impact, how would we go about doing that? Comparison to other
Yeah, I
countries.
mean, yeah, there are ways to do that. I think, for example, the Kaufman Foundation did a study of MIT, and Premnath and Varun must be well aware of this. Around 2012 or 13, I think, was when the report came out. Their estimate was that 25% of the employment generated in the state of Massachusetts was from spin-offs from MIT, either from by faculty, students, alumni, and so forth. The total sort of revenues generated was roughly about $1.9 trillion. At that point, that
Hmm.
was higher than India's GDP.
Wow.
So you can quantify, and just requires some diligence in
Yeah.
collecting the data and putting it together. And I think we need to measure, because until you measure, you really don't know
Yeah.
what the impact really is, right? So
Yeah, I think one of the key reasons why CSR Tech and some of the other companies that are being formed now were on the back of this whole thing that scientists are great at doing their work, but in terms of their disconnect with the industry results in the impact not being there. However, having said that, uh, what's what's the economic impact of something like an indelible ink that NPL, the National Physical Laboratory, had? It's probably not quantifiable, and maybe that brings me to Dr. Premnath. Um, so, given your background, with so many patents to your credit, and now as the head of innovation at NCL, you must share your experience and to build upon what Professor Chandru talked about in terms of the impact of science, and particularly as it related to your experience from lab to market.
Sure. Thank you, Amitabh. So first of all, as you said, there's no doubt that um, science is probably the foundation of creating economic output these days. If you're not in science, you're probably out of the race. So there's no doubt about that, right? And of course, one also needs to understand it, since there are students in the audience, one needs to understand that different things that result in economic output happen over different time scales. And, this any kind of science is basically an act of creation of knowledge. And that knowledge is relevant in some context or the other. Who would have thought that the theory of relativity would be relevant to the GPS that you use on your phone, right? But it is. And if it wasn't there, your phones would not be helping you run your maps, right? And many more things would not have been possible, right? At the same time, there are things which happen on a shorter time scale, right? So let's take the Moderna vaccine, for example, or the BioNTech vaccine, right? Well, you do hear about the 1 year journey to impact, but there's a much longer journey before that, right? Much longer journey of developing that platform for various applications, and even before that, a much longer journey developing some of the platforms which made that possible. Especially, for example, in the Moderna case, there's a lot that happened with delivery systems using lipids, for example, which incidentally, some of the leading people were from MIT as well over there, since Moderna is a Boston-based company. But the thing is, one has to understand that it is very clear that you need to build upon it sequentially. And it's also very clear that knowledge creating institutions are very key to this process. Just like Vijay said, it is, the what he called as higher education. Yes, the higher education institutions are the primary creators of knowledge, and they become one of the most important aspects of this, of delivering economic value in society. Now, in the Indian context, also this has happened. Just look at the courage of the country getting out of independence, investing in science in the way it has done, right? I think that has been a great savior for the country. And you can see the impact of it in several industries. In the case, since I'm from the National Chemical Laboratory, let me talk about something closer to my domain, which is the pharma industry, for example, right? The pharma industry took off in the 1970s because there was a change. The trigger was a change in the patent law system, okay, in India. But that said, we wouldn't have capitalized on that opportunity if we did not have chemists and chemical engineers who could have built the technologies that were needed to deliver the pharmaceutical industry. We needed people who could develop the processes which would be required to, say, take known drugs, but develop it with our own innovative processes and deliver it to the market, and efficiently and economically, and beating the players in the game, right? Today, every third medicine in the world is produced in India, okay? And that is a far cry from what we were doing, say, in the 1970s, where 80% of India's medicines were imported, right? So I think India has done quite well in investing in science, and it has actually done a lot more than what an average country at that level of development would have done. Of course, we could have done a lot more. The other part of the story, which I just want to mention briefly, is that when doing science is one thing, converting it into useful products and services is yet another thing, and taking it to market to build sustainable, scalable enterprises is yet another thing, right? Now, the problem with converting science into economic output has very often been the fact that it requires a very rich and diverse ecosystem to make it happen. You need a variety of things to make it happen. When we look at the Boston ecosystem, for example, and the way it delivers results, we are forgetting that it has naturally evolved that ecosystem over a long period of time. The venture capital industry is born there, right? And here we are inorganically creating all those mechanisms to take it to market, right? So we are sort of, in many ways, in the new age conversion of science to economic output, we are relatively very young, and I'm quite optimistic that we are in the right path, and that's something which we could be doing in many different ways. And Indian scientists have contributed to many different things where there has been direct impact. Of course, you are aware of what's happened in food and agriculture, getting away from, say, a situation where we were in famines to where we were in surplus, right? Or in vaccines, we are today one of the largest. We are the largest producers of vaccines, right? And I believe that there will be other industries where we'll also reach there. And sometimes ecosystems need time to develop. Very artificially created, rapidly created ecosystems can sometimes collapse as well. So I think these are interesting times where I think there are a lot of opportunities. I don't know if I answered your question, but
no. I think
you shots at what you mentioned before as well.
No. It's very useful. If I can just go back to Professor Chandru for a second, would it be fair, based on what Premnath just said, would it be fair to say that measuring the pegging order of the countries contributing to science on the basis of percentage of GDP may not be fair, because we are talking about the impact. Is that a fair statement? Do we need to do So 0.8% of India's GDP, is it comparable, especially considering the costs being far less compared to the other countries? Is that a fair assessment? Do you think we are spending in terms of amount? Is it measurable in terms of amount or in terms of percentage of GDP? Have I made my question clear?
Yes, I think the amounts, we're certainly lower in terms of percentage than countries that are considered successful in translational work, right? And impact of translational work. I think there's always room for uh, you know uh, higher levels of science funding, but I think it's also the question of how you do it strategically, right? And how you target uh, more sort of balance
Mm.
between foundational or fundamental scientific research, the PI sort of culture
Mm.
of actually following your own sort of research agenda, or directed research, which
Mm.
is directed at
Certainly.
challenge problems and grand challenges and developmental agendas. And so I think it's there's the one aspect is the quantum of money, the other is essentially how you strategically deploy it.
Mm.
But both matter a
Both
lot.
matter. Yeah. Yeah. So, hey, Vandana, you've got tremendous experience in actually seeing stuff from private as well as public research and laboratories and intellectual property, and taking it, studying it, curating it, creating a proposal, taking it to the market, uh, doing all kinds of stuff. You must share with us in your experience, both not only as part of CSI Tech, but in your other endeavors, the company that you were working for prior to joining CSI. Tell us a little bit about that. What has been your experience? Do you see? Did you experience that impact that got created as a result of that got made as a result of you, facilitating that, or are we still counting peanuts? For example, in CSI Tech, we did 180 tech transfer deals, but the sum total of all the value that the laboratories derived, not we, the laboratories derived was 8 crores. It was nothing, right? So share with us your experience. Do you think it's changing from the time we were created to now, or even earlier, or otherwise?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Amitabh. It's really great to be part of this exciting discussion. So, as you mentioned, I'll speak from my experience, which has been in life sciences, pharma, healthcare, and now medtech. When I started out, like right after my PhD, I came back from US, and I was lucky enough to work with one of the companies who was plowing in quite a bit of money into R&D, and they were working in biopharma. And the mandate there was like to try and monetize the IP that they had generated through their in-house research, through technology transfer. But sadly, like, after working on that for like almost a year or so, we started to realize that there were no takers per se, in terms of the clients and the partners. And I'm talking this about not very long back, maybe like 4 or 5 years back, before CSR Tech happened. And mainly it was the mindset and the resources to take up disruptive IP. So like they're pretty happy to do what they have been doing for a long time. And then that's when the management and we kind of decided to go through a new route. And like startups are now like all the rage, but decided to go the startup route and actually sell the finished products to the companies. And this, I think, worked a little bit better in terms of, as you say, impact in terms of generating orders and revenue. So like hardcore converting science into economic output. And but I still felt that we were able to sell only improvised known products rather than new molecules, which mainly went into more of a development on a concept sort of scale. Then, of course, at CSI Tech, as you rightly mentioned, got a chance to really work with public labs, and it was very exciting to see if we could develop a commercial model for these CSR technology. And in retrospect, I feel, and we have also spoken about it, that it was ahead of its time. I think CSI Tech, and as you rightly mentioned, the deals, even though the labs we were able to do quite a bit of deals, the impact in terms of, again, the science output, the economic value was maybe quite minuscule. And I think the analysis that all of us sat and did, we found that it was very much dependent on the mindset and the enthusiasm of the individual directors of the labs. And the challenge was also to sort of have the funds and the legal support to kind of execute some of the deals that we were able to bring to the lab. So, but I think in terms of whether the scenario has changed, I would say yes, because I've been following the CSIR tech commercialization journey after I'm sorry, the CSIR labs commercialization journey after CSIR tech was closed down. And I think, some of the deals that we hear of today, like, for example, the Sun Pharma and IICT deals, or the deployment of the NAL Drishti airport system, which we were working on as well. So I think, yes, slowly but surely we are moving in the right direction. But I also feel that, there needs to be a system level approach. I think the work that I'm currently doing, which is working with MedTech Innovations mainly, is more at a systems level. Because definitely to commercialize science, you would need funding, you would need the infrastructure, but it's a very critical thing to build the ecosystem, which also Dr. Premnath and Professor Chandru have alluded to. And basically, this would start with selecting market-ready innovations and creating the market access and scale. And how we can forge collaboration and sort of build viable business models. So it's been slow. We've been able to show some proof points for this, but feeling quite sort of, I would say, encouraged by the positive response from most of the stakeholders. And they're all the way from like startups and the innovation enablers to implementers, like, and the multilateral agencies that we work with throughout in the value chain. But yeah, later on, there are some challenges, and yeah, we could talk about that later on.
So the theme that is coming out from all three of you so far is that, and it's my own experience, that the quality of scientists, I think, was far, far better than what I had anticipated 8 years ago when I, got involved with this whole thing. The question is, and probably the facilities available to them, at least in the public, in the government sector, is decent, but somehow there is a little bit of a disconnect in terms of being able to make an impact. The industries, on one side, they think that labs are doing something, and we don't know what that is. But before I come back to Professor Chandru, Dr. Premnath, just one question. This is a question that I've often asked but never got a straight answer. What is the basis on which a lab director, not just CSIR, any lab director, any government funded, how do they decide, how much money to allocate towards a particular funding or to a particular scientist? Or is it like Professor Chandru said, it's PI based or whatever? How, on what basis do we decide? When we do a company planning, we're always budgeting something, right? We're saying, how is the sales going to happen? Where is the revenue going to come from? So I just want to know what investments to make in. How do they decide?
So Amitabh, you just said that you haven't got a straight answer from anybody. But I'll try and do a good job of it. The complexity arises in the fact that science investments are not like other investments where you can sometimes, these are invested as options that you're creating, and not necessarily like an FD, which is supposed to produce results every second year, every year.
Yeah.
Right. What you're doing is, when you invest in science, very often with an economic output, even a long-term horizon or an economic output in mind, you will invest to create technology options, strategic options for whatever gains. It could be, with the with the expectation that, this may create this opening out there, right? Now, after that, let's say even if it does create that opening, first of all, you're competing in a space with the rest of the world where others are also betting to create that opening. Some will want to close the door on you by filing patents and so on and so forth, right? You're competing in that space. And there are uncertainties about that option being converted into a viable business at the end of the day for somebody, right? So when a scientific body is investing money, right, it is not comparable to a typical investment done by a business in a ongoing business.
Fair point.
Okay? Yeah. So with that in mind, what you have to understand is that very often scientific bodies invest with the intention of building new knowledge and people who could build that knowledge and convert that knowledge into something useful, right? The time scales could be long enough that you don't want to necessarily bet on the horse right now. In terms of which horse you want to bet on, you might actually be betting on a portfolio of activities. Right now, by the way, this is not very uncommon from your early stage venture investing. I'm not talking about late stage investing. I'm talking about early stage venture investing. Isn't that what you do when you create portfolios of investments? And it's quite well known that nobody has been actually able to predict which one is going to be the big money earner, right? And the whole place is littered with instances of so-called wrong investments, right? And the people who have been winners have been laughed at the right in the beginning, right? So I think when we look at science and investing, we have to take it with that perspective in mind. Now, who are the best people to gauge what may be meaningful in the future, right? See, this is a business of foresight, right? Being able to see the future, being able to bet on the future. Now, wouldn't you say that the people who are at the cutting edge of knowledge are probably likely to have a better sense of what might be relevant, say 20, 30 years from now, right? So I think it's best that we trust some of our scientific bodies and scientists to invest in the early stage of science, right? Now, so that's just an answer to your question. I don't know if it answers specifically what you asked, but I think this is what happens when people propose projects and a group of scientists take a view on whether it is worth funding or not. Okay. There are also investments happening in labs which are of a short-term nature, where people bet on whether this particular technology will fly, whether based on some demand predictions or some requests from companies and so on and so forth. So that also happens. But the whole art lies in managing priorities and resources in terms of being able to manage a portfolio of funds and a portfolio of opportunities and see how best to manage it. Now, that's a different matter that people have to be trained to do that, right? And there are gaps there.
No, frankly, Dr. Premnath, I've always felt that, scientists are natural entrepreneurs. Okay, it sounds very funny. Many scientists that I've met, they would say that I'm not an entrepreneur, and they think finance is entrepreneurship. Which brings me to Professor Chandru. I'd like for you to share your journey, which is very exciting. Many of us may know, but many in the audience may not know. It'd be very interesting to find out, when did you first decide and why did you decide to become an entrepreneur? And give us some examples of other people like you throughout the world to give inspiration to all the people in the audience, please.
Yeah, sure. I think happy to give my personal account, but I also just wanted to add to what Premnath was just saying, and I think at least in the context of biotechnology, which is the sector I've been in for some time now, there's been an extraordinary administrator that we had, and that was Raj Bhan, the late Dr. Bhan. And I think, again, Premnath mentioned our strengths in chemistry and our ability to build the pharmaceutical sector. Um, and the pharma industry in the late 90s, or even the early part of this millennium, would always talk about the biology whole in India, the whole, the HOLE, right?
Mhm.
Because in some sense, biology was not, you know, in a position to support the chemistry. To actually, uh, deliver phenomenal potential of innovation. And if you look at what Dr. Bhan did, during his long term at the head of DBT, it was essentially to fill that biology hole. There was enormous amount of capacity building that happened all over the country, and he was able to convince the people who gave the money to invest into that sector. And I think today, if we are seeing a flowering in the life sciences, I think a lot of credit should go to the foresight that he had. And I think that was what Premnath was pointing out, that there are people with the vision to actually set the direction and guide the resources in the way that that future is secured. So I think we have some great and again, sorry, I'm not quite answering your question, but if you also think about the IT sector, I mean, many people think of the success in the IT sector as somehow being created by self-organizing entrepreneurial spirit, and the government didn't meddle, and somehow these great IT entrepreneurs took it on themselves. But actually, if you go back and study the history, in the late 60s and early 70s, when the Department of Electronics did a very careful analysis and saw the potential in software. And on the basis of that, they actually got free machines. Computers were expensive in those days, and gave computers to many of the organizations that have become the IT giants. Not only did they do that, they gave them early seed projects, which actually specialized them in banking software, in railway scheduling, in different sectors of the economy. And at the right time, they stepped back. The government stepped back and said, you can go, run a tax-free status, you have the software technology parks and so on. And, the whole sector took off, right? So there have been people in the leadership of this country who have actually done extraordinary things. And I see, a situation right now again where there is some very enlightened leadership in Delhi, which is actually directing science in very interesting ways, and we'll see the impact of that. So I think I've
Your
said
story.
enough on
We're
that
keen to
topic,
hear
but
your
on my
story.
own,
Yes.
my own journey, I think um, I mean, the sort of sort of the lighthearted version and the serious version. The lighthearted version is that I was 47 years old. My child had grown up and gone away, and I had a midlife crisis, so I became an entrepreneur. So that's that's sort of the lighthearted version. But I think the actually the my journey was not a journey of just my uh, moving from academia into entrepreneurship. We did it as a group. We were four professors. I must name them because this was a journey we did together. Swami Manohar, Vinay Vishwanath, and Ramesh Hariharan, and myself. And we had a lab at IISc, which in a way was like a media lab, right, at MIT. We called it the Perceptual Computing Lab. And we did a lot of consulting with industry. And although we were actually trained as theoretical computer scientists, we actually built stuff, right? And the computer came out of that kind of energy. And we did it because we were a group, and we were willing to take the risk together, right? And then suddenly, the timing was right. I think we were the first professors in the country to actually launch into entrepreneurship with the blessings of the university, right? So this was the first case of sanctioned entrepreneurship by professors in the country. Professor Govardhan Mehta was the director, and he was supportive. Ratan Tata was the president of the court, and he said, "Why aren't there more startups out of ISC?" And so we wrote a letter and said, our lab is ready to start companies. How should we go about it? And Professor Mehta said, well, I'll set up a committee. We don't have a process. So the committee was set up, and it took a little patience, but in about 8-9 months, we had the blessings of the council to start two companies. One was to commercialize the computer, and the other was to start Strand Life Sciences. So that it was, and after that it was generally a fun journey there, that we all were together, and we are still together. We are still work together and are very good friends. And I think the other point that you made about scientists being entrepreneurs or potential entrepreneurs, I've always maintained that, like you said, that anybody who's a research scientist and somebody who's an investigator, a principal investigator, they have to raise money for their research. Absolutely. And to support their lab, right? They have to manage people because they'll run a team. They'll have to market their work, because unless you market your work, you don't get the next grants.
Next grant.
Right? So you've learned everything that you need to know as an entrepreneur, right? All that you need is to, one, be prepared to take certain personal, emotional risk, right? It's more emotional than financial, mind you, right? And the second is that you have to learn to run like hell, right? Because the time scales of doing business are very different from the time scales of doing academic work, right? So one of the things that happens to somebody who's a professor is that when the phone rings, they pick it up, right?
That's true.
If they've become an entrepreneur, then they pick it up because the phone ringing is an opportunity, right?
Sales.
If they're just, if they're a professor deep into their research, they'll say, let it go to voicemail, right? So I think, that little bit of mindset, if, adjustments have to be made. But otherwise, you're right. Anybody who's active in research and is, essentially, playing the game of getting research grants and building their research programs, is well prepared to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. Good to get that endorsement. I've always believed, raising funds and the numbers and everything is all about 8, 9, and 10 standard ratios and proportions. If you are clear with ratios and proportions, you can raise money. Vandana, you've been an advisor, apart from your daily work, you've also been an advisor in the startups in the STEM space. Can you share examples of something similar, as good or maybe not as good as what Professor Chandru has created? What are you seeing happen there? Start with what are you seeing happen there? Are there more and more innovators who are trying to come in, or less of I don't want to name the GMV related companies, but you talk about some real stuff.
Yeah, no, definitely. So as you rightly mentioned, I do work with some of the incubators across the country and, sort of reviewing the work as well as mentoring some of the startups. And there are examples of people going into corporate life, engineers, sort of building up a body of work there, and then suddenly starting to get to the startups. But I think lately what is happening, and which is a really good trend to see, is I have also come across startup founders who are like fresh out of maybe IITs, and they just go ahead, take the risk, and build their own startups. Of course, like as we know, the progression of the startup, there are certain valleys and there are certain troughs that one needs to be aware about. So I think technology wise, these founders are very, very skilled, and they know exactly what it is that they want to do. uh, I think there is some hand holding and stuff required as they start to think about the how to really take this particular science that they might have some ideas based on certain science, and which they have now converted into a technology, but really bringing it out into the market as a product which sort of solves a problem or meets some needs.
Mm.
I think that particular sort of what I called as market access or scaling the technology enough, we do see that that is some time in coming in the Indian context, I would say, and there are
Give
many
any
reasons.
examples that you can share? I mean, if you don't, you don't want to name them, it's fine. But can you give some examples?
Yes, yes, sure. So I think like the recent ones that worked in the space of, as I said, MedTech
Not just
Innovations.
your own experience, but ones that you might have heard of as well.
Yes, yes. So, for example, like we were working with this one company which was into doing AI-based ECG monitoring. I will not name the company, but it's been around for 7 years, and very, very high tech end prototype. They were one of the first ones to come out of it. But the journey to market is something we've been trying to work with them, handhold them for the last 1.5 years. And what I find is that the founder team is so hardcore technology driven, that a lot of times really nudging them to kind of look at the market, what are the market needs. It's taken some time, and now that we are in a position where they have sort of started to do that, they themselves are finding out that after 7 years, some of the products that they created are actually being questioned by the user. So very simple things like the user wants a certain way of how the device should operate. Should it be put on the body or should it be a wearable? So they have been having to do these iterations, which if you look at it from a startup's point of view and in their life journey, it is a very costly affair, because you have spent so much time building a prototype, building a product, and now to go again and do a iterative again redesigning and then testing it again in the market, it gives takes away the precious time for the success or the sort of, like you say, impact of the whole startup that you have started out.
Correct.
But yes, I think like some of the work that we are doing currently, one of the things that we sort of tell the startups is to do things parallelly, and yeah, that is, I think, helping out.
Thank you so much, Dr. Premnath. I mean, since you're really a veteran and in some ways an inspiration to so many incubators that are out there, in what way do you think our education system is either lacking or is not paying enough focus or attention to sort of prepare people for what you once described to me as tough science, right? The amount of time it takes, the amount of knowledge available, people available, venture capitalists available. So what does our education system lack, or you think it has good? And I'd like your views as well as Dr. Chandru's, please.
Let me just pick on a couple of points which I think youngsters here can use. It's not meant to criticize our education system. Actually, we are, all said and done, we do produce very good people and good talent. But that said, when you look at innovation, so basically, see, when you talk about economic output, you're talking about doing valuable problem solving, right? And that in a new way, and that's what innovation is. And innovation is slightly different from the act of just say generating knowledge, right? You have to solve problems. Now when you look at our education system today is geared, let me point out a few things which are quite important. One is, you will notice that a person who is an inventor or a problem solver has to be fairly discontent with things, right? You cannot accept things as they are. You want to change it. You want to have it better. You want to improve things, right? Now, if you want to do that and also look at creative ways to do it, you need to have time. You need to be willing to so-called waste time. Okay, all this doesn't happen in an environment of high efficiency. If you look at our education system today, we have everything laid out of what is to be done in the 8th standard, 9th standard, 10th standard, 11th standard, 12th standard, and that's what you're supposed to do as a recipe. I don't see people having those moments of time available for creative thinking, or to be even discontent with the world around them and try and look for solutions. Okay. The second thing I want to tell, which is for college students, is that look, when we try and learn, we take it as information, right? Most of us are learning it as information. But very often in your life, there are two things that are going to be important. One is defining problems and not necessarily only giving solutions to problems given by somebody else. And defining problems is never taught to you, right? You are never given an opportunity to go and explore a problem to solve, to identify it, to define it. So that is something which we should be looking at, and many of our youngsters need to focus on. The second point has to do with foresight. Okay. When I talk to youngsters, I tell them, I ask them, do you think your education in the best of institutions, okay, allowed you an opportunity to look into the future? Okay. And did it allow you to say, predict, or at least bet with some confidence on what might be important, say 20 years from now? If it did not, okay, and if it was something which was taught 20 years back, you need to be worried. Okay. And don't blame just your teachers and your curriculum. You have enough opportunities to read, enough opportunities today to expose yourself to the latest. Are you doing that or not? Right. So that, I think, is what we should be looking at. A few points which I think we should be looking at as a country, as educators, as people in the entrepreneurship and innovation space. And I think it's very important that as a country, we build that culture and the ability to innovate, and especially look into the future, because that is where the opportunities are going to emerge increasingly as we move out from a factor-driven economy and an efficiency-driven economy. It is inevitable that we will have to be an innovation-driven economy. And if you're not preparing ourselves for that, we are losing out on those opportunities. So I think that is what I would like to add. I think Vijay can talk more.
I mean, let me just rephrase the question one more time so that Vijay can answer this little more targeted. So what do you think, Vijay, the research and academic institutions, the consumers of the output of science, and the government and the people who are entering, what role must they all play for this to happen? What should the government do, for example? There's a question on the chat I just saw.
Yeah, it's a very interesting question, and I think I'll go back to the example that Premnath started with, which was Moderna, right? And try to explain how Moderna came about. So there is this group called Flagship Pioneering, set up by an interesting MIT graduate, Nabur Faye. He's Lebanese. He had come to the US like many of us went as a grad student. And, now, what Flagship Pioneering does is the following. They have a group of people who identify value propositions. Okay. So they're not looking at what research is going on at the universities, but they're just coming up with value propositions, right? Saying, what if we could address uh, therapeutics for this particular disorder that would have this kind of uh, response in patients, right? Uh, is there value? Is there a market for it? Is there, will this get reimbursed? And all the usual questions in the life sciences, right? And so they collect about 100 of these questions, of these value propositions, and then they break up into small teams, which takes each of these value propositions and then beats them down, right? And figures out how we should move, how this could even be realized, right? And then figures out who are the right scientists in the ecosystem to go and talk to and see if this makes sense. If it doesn't make sense, should this idea be tweaked? And by the end of the year or end of a chunk of time, they've whittled it down to maybe 4 or 5 ideas. Then they invest about $1 million on each of those ideas and take it through validation. And at the end of that, there's a couple of companies that comes out, right? And Moderna was found like this around 2012. Uh, there was a technology that had been developed at Children's Hospital using mRNA for doing various cell modifications, and it fit into a scheme for a drug discovery approach, right? And so it was flagship pioneering that actually went and built this whole value proposition, and had the seed capital to essentially validate an idea, okay, and then form the company and then get the right talent in place and put it together. Now this is what we need to do systematically, because I think our inside the educational system, people find it difficult to ask these value propositions or to come up with these value propositions. That has to come from outside, and then you sort of work with the entire ecosystem of researchers, innovators who are all are all ready to do something that's impactful, but this guidance needs to be put together.
So
Now
how
for
do we
this,
attract? Yeah.
yeah.
No,
So,
please complete your point.
so I think this just needs to be replicated in different ways. I mean, something that worked in Cambridge may not work everywhere, but I do think we have to think very differently about the ecosystem. We also have to think differently about uh, you know like there are not too many Elon Musks in this world, right? Who can go after really big sort of science fiction ideas and take them through. So you don't really, you need to do more recombinant innovation, as I call it, right? You
That's a
need
good
to
word. I like the word.
put people together, put ideas together, and create value by doing this recombinant approach. And for that, you need to create very interesting virtual marketplaces, various ways of identifying providers of little solutions, putting them all together, and creating value that way.
So
And
I'm
I,
going to be
I
asking.
think
I'm going to be asking you a very, very interesting question, which I want everybody who's watching this to wait for towards the end. But let me ask you one more question. So the three components of the ecosystem, the research institutions, whether they're private or public, the scientists or the scientists people who are desiring to become a scientist, and then the industry that adopts. Yeah. And then sitting on all top of these three, the policymakers. Yeah. So I'm curious about two things. Private sector is very, very clear. if something is, if they see an opportunity, they'll go for it. Yeah. So we cannot fault people who manage other people's money to not find an opportunity. Okay, they'll get thrown out. So I don't want to fault them. The research institutions do their job, and I'm keen to know, A, what should the government do, and B, let's just talk about what should the government do. I mean, they can't exactly make this happen. They can't tell the private sector, hey, you have to take technology from BARC or from ISRO or from DRDO or from whatever.
I mean, look at what our principal scientific advisor has done. You know, with all these innovators who were keen to work on different aspects of diagnostics for COVID and viral disorders and infectious diseases and so on, is actually encouraged this creation of a virtual marketplace. It's called indigenous diagnostics, and it's been put to it's starting to come together. It's being done at CCAM, and it's being it's being funded by the Rockefeller Foundation, and they're actually putting all the suppliers and the entire ecosystem together, so that the people will actually work together to to essentially indigenize the delivery of diagnostics. And of course, this has happened because of the pandemic, that you've been able to do this. But once you put this kind of an ecosystem together, this is going to be responsive to all kinds of challenges, and you're going to get those combinatorial effects that I was talking about. And I think so he seems to understand, right, what it takes. And so I think the government can be creative in the way it approaches these things. And as I said earlier, I think we have an interesting leadership right now in government that I think can make a huge difference.
Thank you for that, Vandana. I know we're probably running out of time, so I just want to make sure that everybody stays back with the one question that I have for Vijay at the end. Vandana, you heard what both Dr. Premnath and Vijay Chandru talked about in terms of what it takes to help the ecosystem. Now, as a parent, and you and I were talking about your son who's now in 12th standard. As a parent, what would your advice be to other parents, or even upcoming students, in terms of how they should go about? What would be your guide for them to pursue their careers?
Right. So, I mean, it's really funny that you bring up my son, because he's not at all getting into science. Totally different.
The question wasn't on science. The question was advice.
Oh, yeah.
Vendor, right?
Yeah.
Or Dravid these days. Sorry, I forget the name of the cricketers.
No, so really, I think, just the reason I brought up science is because that's the context of the, talk today. And I think, really, this is something that's been on my mind for a while. And I've started doing these, sort of webinars, and in COVID, of course, webinars and otherwise physically with youths. So these are people who are in 10th or 12th and, trying to understand. So I think especially in the Indian context, I think, I would also love as a parent to see more of this happening. Is as a scientific community, I think it's the onus is on us to sort of excite our students, our youth, very early on, about taking up science education or any other field. But, specifically for science, I would say, because that's what I've been associated with so far, is showcasing to them what is science, what is the technology applications, even as far as going to the business models, because we all do that work, but it's very little that we talk to them about it, the delight of entrepreneurships, what is the advantage of maybe doing science innovation, and what is the benefits of applying this for the betterment of life and society, which I think this forum, ISF, is setting out to do, bringing out the different aspects of science. So I think And also, when they get that flight of imagination, I think the best thing as a parent that you can do is sort of let go and let them really explore as to what it is that excites them, what is it that they're passionate about it. So, like for example, my son has now decided he might want to become a budding actor or might take up cricket. But of course, I'm sort of insisting that he have a plan B. But yeah, really, that is what my advice to parents would be to sort of, but yes, from the science point of view, I think it's very important to communicate as to what is happening in science and what is the career that they could look forward to, in terms
I
of what
want to
they're.
quickly run to the Q&A because we have ignored all of those. But one question for Vijay is, and it's funny that you mentioned Dr. Vijay Raghavan. If you became the principal secretary to the PM, complete the sentence. If you became the principal secretary advice as a principal scientific advisor to the Prime Minister, what would your few advice be?
Well, I think it's obviously a very complicated job, and so it's hard to uh, talk about all the aspects. I mean, there have been
Just two or three, maybe. Yeah.
yeah. So I'll tell you the one thing that really excites me right now is how the potential for biology and engineering is
Mm,
coming together, right?
mm,
And Susan Hockfield has written this book called The Age of Living Machines. And, I've been really fascinated by this next stage that we're going to see so it's, there was biology was developing, molecular biology. The parts list for molecular biology was created by very good instrumentation, and physicists helped a lot there. And then you get the software of biology, which was genomics.
mm,
And now you're at a stage where biology is ready to get uh, this integration with engineering, so whether it's
mm.
nano engineering or
That's right.
material science and so on. And I think this blend is going to be a phenomenal new era of scientific investigation. And I do believe that India should invest in this. And there, I think there are a few places where engineering and biology have strengths. I mean, I sit in one, the Indian Institute of Science, and so there are some extraordinary programs that can come about. Doesn't have to be all in one institution. It can be
Yeah.
a collaborative approach. I think there's so that this is one theme that really excites me. I think there was also a comment in the Q&A boxes that um, say something for students, right? For school students, right? That was the comment, and I said, and I was thinking, what could I tell school student? And I think in some ways, Premnath has already said this, and I think we really need to for young students to be able to develop their imagination. And I think the more space you give them for developing imagination, the more the creativity is going to be, right? And so my piece of advice is, I know there's a lot of pressure on exams and getting admissions and grades and all of that, but don't forget to develop your imagination, right? And so I think again, if this was your hypothetical question, uh, to we need some reforms in education at a very fundamental level. And I think the new NEP is
Mm.
definitely a right step in that direction. How it gets implemented and so on will be something that would be very critical, for the future of the nation. And I think that's something that we need to pay attention to. And finally, I think uh, One Health is obviously a very important topic, and the fact that we've faced this pandemic should only make us much more alert for surveillance, for disaster management, and essentially being much more aware uh, how the environment, zoonosis,
Mm.
um, you know, uh, we haven't even, really looked carefully at all the dangers lurking there. The Global Virome Project predicts about 3 major zoonotic events every year at the minimum. So we are going to have to be extremely well prepared, and so One Health, I think, thinking of all living creatures and all the interactions, including the environment and so on, is going to be an important theme.
This is fantastic.
I'm sure these are already there in Vijay's Vijay's thinking and his advice and so on.
Carry these 3 forward for sure. Okay.
Right, and so, we are good friends, so
Right.
so
No,
I
that's
can
excellent.
I
Yeah,
can say
I just want to invite Shruti to come, put herself on and see if there are any questions. If there are none, then I have a few more questions in terms of way forward, vision for the future, etc. But I'll like to open this for the questions.
Right. Sir, I think we can start wrapping up now. I think there are a lot of audience questions that were answered. So now we can take the last few statements.
No. You let's ask the questions from the audience first.
All right. Okay. So one question that we have received, and it's been repeated a couple of times, is what are certain skills that one needs to have if one is transitioning from pure science to science entrepreneurship?
Actually, all 3 of them can answer this one. Premnath, you want to go for it?
Can you hear me? Yeah.
Go.
Yes, I think one of the things which I would suggest is, of course, as Vijay mentioned, if you have been a PI, you have probably done a lot of what entrepreneurs do. But one of the things which you need to reorient yourself is that as good entrepreneurs, you need to focus on the end point. One of the weaknesses of people in science is that they seek excitement and every day. There's this itch for a new idea or a new solution every day. But as an entrepreneur, your focus has to be on the end point in the sense of delivering a product or a service. So one of the things which we try to do is to also look at orienting people towards potential impact of what they could achieve if they just kept the focus on. Or if you realize that you are the person who wants to be doing everything new every day, you need to find a partner who can keep the focus on the end point, so that even investors trust your judgment on focusing on the end point and not necessarily on the excitement of the early stage of science. Other than that, I think it's a lot of soft skills. You will quickly realize that things which you ignore as typical science students, like networking, is so key. Business is all about networks, about connecting the dots, about knowing where to leverage which resource, which connect, and getting to the point. These kind of things which we tend to ignore are extremely important. Communicating clearly the value of what you're doing, communicating to convey the possibilities is so important. These kind of skills, I think, are very, very important when you are entering entrepreneurship. And many of us in our studies are so ingrained in solving our math problems that we forget to do any of these. So I think this is something which many of our students should try and do. So take time out, do your elocution competitions, debates, go and network with people, figure out all of those things. And as Vijay said, don't leave out bio from your list of subjects in 11th and 12th.
The physicists will be very happy, but we'll talk to them. Vandana, you want to add anything before we move to the next question?
Yeah, so I think Dr. Premnath has covered it quite nicely. I would also say that, certain things like the mindset of taking risks, because I think that is something that needs to be there to sustain you through the ups and downs of entrepreneurship. It's not going to be always rosy. And the other thing that I think is very important, that you're very observant. If you can start with a problem statement, that will usually come from either some kind of a formal market study, but good when you're just trying to transition from being a student to entrepreneurship, the many observations, what is needed to be done. If you have a good view of that, I think 50% of the success is guaranteed, because you're starting with something that's a need. So I think these 2 points I would like to add to what Dr. Premnath said.
Awesome. Thank you. Shruti?
Sorry. Okay, so the next question that we have here is, what is the scope for deep tech in commercialization and scientific research?
Right.
Who wants to take that?
Maybe I'll have a bash.
Okay.
I think, certainly, I think deep tech has, has not been, a major focus, in our, understanding of how, great companies have been created in India. I think we are fascinated by unicorns, which are not, which are not necessarily based on deep tech per se. Uh, but I think there is a definite change the um, in the ecosystem supporting deep tech innovation. And I last year, well, actually 2019, in the WECS division of IISc, we were celebrating the 50th anniversary of one of the departments, computer science. So we actually decided to investigate how many companies uh, had come out of the division, right? And in the last 5 years. And we found that 52 companies had been created by faculty, students, alumni of IISc, just from the WECS program. And each and every one of them was a deep tech company, right? So they had actually, developed some really interesting piece of technology as part of their R&D to be able to launch the company and launch a product. So, and they had found funding and had built some momentum through it. And so we decided that, people should understand that there is a possibility of this. And so we actually uh, started a whole series of celebrations of these deep tech companies that had spun out. And we spent one whole day at the J.N. Tata Auditorium, where these companies gave presentations, they demonstrated what they had built, their products, and we invited a whole bunch of venture people and investors to come. And out of that whole, sort of momentum that was created, a few VCs have gotten together now and are actually conducting a series of webinars on deep tech innovation in different verticals. And so I know that Bloom Ventures and Pi Ventures and several others, I think there are about 5 or 6 funds that have come together to actually start creating this movement, in some sense, towards deep science and deep tech innovation. So, see, fundamentally, I think if you want to create a a kind of IP-driven value, right? There does need to be focus. I mean, this has to be one of the sectors that develops. And so, whether you want to call it deep science or deep tech, I think there's our institutions are obviously such excellent places for deep science and technology. And so if they spin off companies, those should be in many ways uh, creating some IP, right? And so I think
That's good input. Shruti, you want to come in?
Yeah. So I think one question that we haven't answered yet is that Bangalore is being called as the next Silicon Valley of India. How do we ensure that smaller towns and cities also get opportunities in tech IP commercialization?
Well, I'm from Bangalore, and I'm biased. So, maybe somebody else should answer this.
So I think Pune and Bangalore
But I
should.
just want to correct one thing. Everyone compares Bangalore to Silicon Valley. I actually call Bangalore the original bean town, because it is actually it's more like Boston than like Silicon Valley. And as you know, the nickname for Boston is Beantown. And the folk story about Bangalore's name, it's not really historically correct, but the folk story is that it was named after Bendakale Uru.
Yeah, yeah.
So the place of cooked beans, right? So Bangalore is a bean town. And I think there are various reasons we can talk about it, but I think one reason that people shouldn't forget is there's a 110-year-old university, the Indian Institute of Science. And it's been, there is a core that it's the mother node, right? And if you see a lot of momentum that Bangalore has been able to create, I think it has to be, there has to be some acknowledgement of.
I think some people in the Atal Innovation, as well as also in the even Varun Agrawal and others, are trying to put together things which, rather than a push factor to say go to Indore or go to the new Amaravati or all of that, they're trying to see if they can help the ecosystem create a pull factor to say. And in some ways, obviously, COVID has taught all of us that the things that we assumed that we couldn't do without, we're doing without. So I'm sure that there will be some steps. I'm sorry, we're not able to answer that question correctly because we don't have the strategy that we can discuss in the next 5 minutes of the time left. Yeah.
Amitabh, can I add here?
Please do.
Yeah. Can I add here? See, there are hundreds of innovation clusters in the world. Okay. WIPO puts out a list along with the Global Innovation Index, and there are hundreds of them. And with all apologies to Vijay, Bangalore still features pretty low on that list compared to many others, right? So I think we should keep it in perspective and look at what creates such innovation clusters, right? And there are recipes. Clearly, a top-class research university is one of them, right? And building such an ecosystem requires many other aspects, including financing, methods. There are industry which has come up in whatever form, a bunch of competent people who really want to build some of those companies and have the wherewithals to build them, and so on. And this has happened in many other places, and it has happened also late in their knowledge creation journey, right? So, for example, Cambridge the story is only about, say, 30, 40 years old for the biocluster in Cambridge, right? Whereas the knowledge creation history is so rich and dates much longer, right? So I think there is scope for us to build many such clusters in India. The move by the PSA's office to build clusters is a very good one. It's only that I hope that we keep the focus on building innovation clusters in the beginning, so that we can really push, create value, which value for society, which then feeds back into creating many more, or putting in more resources, exciting more people into getting into deep science. But just one last point I want to make is, please remember that if you take a little step back and look at all the inventions and innovations that have shaped you, many of them are a product of deep science, okay, including the internet that you're talking about, right? So let's not forget that. And that is a very exciting thing for many of our youngsters. I think if you want to change the world, look at larger problems to solve, which capture your imagination, which thrill you. I think you need to look at deep tech at some point, and I think it's worth the try. It's something which you should be exploring. And a training in science is probably, or science, engineering, or any of the scientific disciplines, is probably the best opening that you have to visualize the future and to participate in it. So I think all the people who have been studying science should explore, or at least try to explore, a possibility of contributing to the innovation economy that India needs to build.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, over to you, sir. I think we're good with the question.
Okay, awesome. I just saw one question. It says, ma'am, as someone who specializes in the field of research, commercialization, have you faced gender discrimination? It's probably directed at you, Vandana. Have you faced gender discrimination?
Not at all. I think, yeah. And I can say that confidently. I think what comes your way is basically dependent on how you project yourself. So yeah, not at all. I think it's always the work and what you do and your performance.
You want to have any concluding remarks before I hand it over to, I think everybody's got a chance to speak around. I just, Vandana, you want to add anything before we end?
Yeah, I think it's been a very exciting discussion, and I've learned a lot also from other two panelists. So I just want to sort of, we alluded to this, what is the ecosystem level, how do we see this going forward? So, and I think there's also a question about that. So I think to me, after, whatever experiences I've had, commercialization of innovation is essentially something that needs to be done at a systemic level, involving the entire value chain. And someone, whether that is, a private agency like what we are trying to do, or the government, needs to tie things together and, come up with an ecosystem approach. And for example, I'll give for that is, what I mean is, right now we are supposed, for example, developing a model with the government of Telangana to build real life clinical settings, testing settings for MedTech Innovations. And what we have done is, we have involved the local innovation enablers, the clinical and commercial experts, the industry, and other partners to co-design this ecosystem, which we hope will, facilitate market access, and also the scale that innovations and technology need to, before they can say they have really arrived, which is through public channels. So kind of trying to bring this together, not the most easiest thing to do. It is an experiment we are doing, but we hope, it works. So that is one. And the couple of things that I wanted to bring, which is more at a technology level, is, of course, for the maximum output from science, I think we need to start with the needs of the market and the problem statements, and solve these through technology innovations rather than the other way around. I mean, this is being said many times and repeated, but I still find, like, this is something that needs to be reiterated. And an example is, like, we found that many of the CSI technologies, for example, were not like, good enough for commercialization, and could not be moved past concept of prototype. So maybe that could be one of the reasons. Also, for successful commercialization and scientific output and adoption, I think you need to start building the viable business model and engaging with stakeholders early on in your journey. So not like really wait for the technology or the prototype to be developed, start
But
engaging.
just to add here, it's not just about CSR to name a laboratory group or something, but
No, it was just
apply anywhere. So
Yeah.
this could be anywhere.
Yeah.
Adla, I'm very conscious of the time. But are we missing anything else, Dr. Premnath, Vijay? Do you want to add any last words, Vijay or Premnath?
I would just like to mention that I do believe that we need to build better tech transfer offices within institutions. I present company excluded, of course. There is a situation where you have an institution and you have an incubator, and really, there it's not as if work being done in the institution is being translated and taken into the incubator, right? So just putting up an incubator by itself is not quite enough. You need to create that culture within the institution, and you need to facilitate that. And that facilitation, again, you can't just appoint a professor nearing retirement to be in charge of tech transfer. That is not the answer, right? You really need someone who has been there, done it, then come back, to try and build something for an institution, to lead tech transfer. And I think that we need to solve that problem. And I think we haven't tackled that head on.
It's very individualistic. There is no systemic way to have those
So,
to reach that space.
and
What's the
and
best?
for example, at one of my classmates at MIT ran tech transfer at Harvard Medical School, and he reported to the president of Harvard, right? And he had essentially the same status as a dean of the university, and I think these things are important. I think if this is not if you don't pay attention to that, then you're not going to get the transformation of
One of the
culture.
most well-respected IT companies on which I worked for more than 20 years ago, the head of the organization used to tell me that, I will take a call from my salespeople at 2 p.m. in the night, 2 a.m. in the night, anytime. Premnath, you want to add something?
Yeah, I just wanted to one clarification which I want to tell you is uh, economic output from science goes well beyond what you measure through tech transfer. Okay, and we should be careful that we don't equate the two. For example, MIT will have a annual budget exceeding $1 billion. Johns Hopkins is $2.5 billion. Their tech transfer income is minuscule compared to that. But the economic outcomes that come out of it because of various diffusion effects is way larger. So it is very important to do it, to transfer that. But the metric which we measure as income should not be misread. There's a lot more that accrues. And as a society, we need to be wise in investing in science with that larger.
Sonalika tractor, for instance.
Oh yeah. So there are many examples of this where you don't see numbers in terms of earnings for universities, but the impact is phenomenal. Okay, and I think we should not lose that at all. And please also remember there are many which come from basic science, which will happen, say, 50 years down the road. How are you going to measure the impact of that, right? But without that, you're helpless, right? So anyway, I think thank you for this discussion.
Great point. Thank you so much, all of you, Vijay, Vandana, Dr. Premnath. Thank you so much. I'm glad that I got the opportunity to talk to all three of you in one go. Shruti, thank you so much for organizing this India Science Fest. Awesome job. Are we done?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Shrivastava. Thank you, Professor Chandru, Dr. Sarda, Dr. Premnath. It was an absolute pleasure listening to all four of you speak. I think it was an enriching discussion, and I'm sure so many of our attendees have learned so much about this field because there's not enough awareness about it. And I think the very fact that we brought this to light, through all of you, it was such a pleasure to have you on board. And I myself have learned so much. I'm sure our attendees have learned so much more. So thank you so much. It was an absolute pleasure having all four of you. Thank you so much for coming here, and we hope to associate with you in the future too. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Good night, everyone in India.
And to all our attendees, I would just like to say thank you for staying with us till the very end of this discussion. It was really great, very, very informative. I'm sure all of you gained a lot out of it because we certainly did. So I would like to wish you all a very good night, and I'd also like to tell you all that we have a feedback form that I'm just going to shoot in your chat box. So if any of you would like to give us your feedback, we would be very, very grateful because we want to improve over the coming weeks and the years. So we also have a bunch of events lined up for the entire month of January, like I mentioned before. Our themes are space, robotics, healthcare. We also have talks on general science and science communication. Some very exciting workshops, discussions, demonstrations, and games for all of you. So stay tuned, go over to our website, check out all the events that we have planned for all of you, and make sure that you participate in all of them because every event is free for you all. And we truly want you all to celebrate science along with us. Thank you so much. Have a great night and keep celebrating science.